All right, so you've just got home. What's the first thing that you have to do before you go inside your house? Well, you obviously got to pull out your keys to unlock your door. But unbeknownst to you, there's a much richer history and backstory behind the locks that you so carelessly use in your everyday life. Come along with me, and we're going to learn about the history of locks, how a pin tumbler lock, or the most common lock today, works, other types of locks used today, and a lot of the everyday places that they're used. Starting off with the history of locks, locks go back to ancient Egypt, and they found ruins in Iraq and Iran that also used rudimentary locks that were made of wood, and they were very basic and low security. When locks finally got to Europe, namely Greece, things called warded locks came out, and they were essentially slats of metal fused together with notches for a key to be able to turn. And this was the gold standard of locks for years and years. Now, coincidentally, the key that you think of whenever you think of a key, like the shape, is the key to a warded lock. Not much changed for thousands of years until Linus Yale Sr. was born in 1797. He was mainly working on bank vaults, but he wanted a better solution for locks. So he invented his own lock using springs and pins. And it was a rudimentary version of the modern version that we use today, known as the pin tumbler lock. Although he didn't really get very far with it. His son, Linus Yale Jr., was born in 1821, and he opened up a lock shop that is still around today called Yale. During his time, he invented padlock combination locks, and in 1857, he patented the pin tumbler lock that is still used today. Now that we've covered the history of locks, I'm going to talk about how they work. So there's multiple components when it comes to the locks. There's driver pins, key pins, a spring, and a plug, and a shear line. When you insert your key, there's little notches on the key that lift the key pins up to a certain height to set in the driver pins above the shear line. When everything's above the shear line, the plug can rotate freely to unlock the lock. However, there is a safety feature where if everything is pushed above the shear line, it will not rotate, otherwise it'd be too easy to open up the lock. There are many other kinds of locks that are still used today, notably the tubular lock, which is a lot like the pin tumbler lock, except that it has the pins arranged on the outside instead of in a straight line. Another one is the wafer lock, which is, instead of multiple pieces for the pins, it's just one piece per pin, and it's all a more solid lock. The last piece that's still used today is the warded lock, which is only really used for low security applications anymore, and padlocks for outdoor areas, because there's something called a skeleton key, which can be used to open up virtually any warded lock. Now, locks are used everywhere across your daily life, notably in the doors to your house, which use pin tumbler locks, the doors to your car, which use wafer style locks, bike locks, which use a variation on the combination lock that Linus Yale invented, padlocks, which also use a pin tumbler lock, bolt latch locks, which are unopenable by keys but can be opened from the inside with a simple latch. And finally, vending machines and washing machines at laundromats, which use the tubular lock to open them up. Today we've covered the history of locks, how a pen tumbler works, the different kinds of locks that are still used today, the areas that you might see them in. Now that you have the key to the knowledge, you can rest easier at night inside your house knowing that there's so much more to these everyday objects than you ever would have considered. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Lock It Up, and we love to see you next time.